Welcome to History Teller YT, where we bring the past to life one epic story at a time. Today, we journey into the heart of Southern Africa to explore the rise, glory, and enduring legacy of the Zulu Kingdom, a tale of warriors, strategy, and unbreakable spirit. From the revolutionary genius of Shaka Zulu, who transformed a small clan into a formidable empire, to the brave leadership of Cetshwayo, who challenged the might of the British Empire. This story is more than battles and kings. It's about culture, resilience, and identity that survived centuries of conquest, colonization, and oppression. In this journey, you'll witness the blood, bravery, and brilliance that shaped the Zulu nation. Experience their legendary victories at Isandlwana and Rorke's Drift, and understand how the spirit of Shaka and Cetshwayo still echoes in modern Zululand. Stay with us, because this is a story that deserves your full attention. A tale that will take you from the rolling hills of the 18th century all the way to the modern legacy of a warrior people whose story continues to inspire the world. Let's begin. Before the name Zulu echoed across southern Africa, the rolling hills and fertile valleys of modern-day KwaZulu-Natal were home to scattered clans and small chiefdoms. Each clan lived independently, bound by kinship and tradition. Life revolved around cattle, symbols of wealth, power, and survival. These early Bantu-speaking people farmed, herded livestock, and worshipped their ancestors through sacred rituals. Warfare was small-scale, usually fought with short spears and wooden shields over grazing land or cattle theft. Yet beneath this seemingly simple life, tensions brewed. Competition for resources, population growth, and trade with coastal tribes created a pressure that would soon ignite. The region was like dry grass waiting for a spark, and that spark would be a man named Shaka Zulu, whose vision and brutality would change southern Africa forever. Before his rise, the Zulu were merely one of hundreds of minor clans, small, humble, and often dominated by stronger neighbors like the Ndwandwe and Mthethwa. But destiny had chosen them for greatness. The land was restless, and the people yearned for unity. The time for scattered tribes was ending. The age of empires in Africa was dawning. Shaka was born around 1787, the illegitimate son of Chief Senzangakona of the small Zulu clan and a woman named Nandi. His birth was surrounded by scandal. His mother was not officially married, and the Zulu people looked down on her. As a result, Shaka grew up in hardship and humiliation. He and his mother were driven away from the Zulu and forced to live among the Langini people, where they endured constant mockery. These early years of pain forged the steel within Shaka. Every insult, every blow, every rejection became fuel for his ambition. He learned to survive, to endure hunger, and to fight fiercely. As he grew older, he joined the Mthethwa under the powerful chief Dingiswayo, who noticed Shaka's intelligence and courage. Dingiswayo became both mentor and ally, teaching him the art of warfare and leadership. It was here that Shaka began developing his revolutionary military ideas, new formations, new weapons, and a ruthless discipline that would later define his rule. The boy once mocked as illegitimate was transforming into a warrior whose name would strike fear across a continent. His rise was only beginning, and soon he would claim the destiny that had long been denied to him. By the early 1800s, the region known as the Natal Coast was in turmoil. Drought, famine, and population pressure had set tribes against one another. Trade with Portuguese and Arab merchants along the coast introduced new goods, beads, cloth, and even guns, but also created new rivalries. Under Dingiswayo's leadership, the Mthethwa Confederation began uniting smaller clans through diplomacy and force. Shaka, serving as one of Dingiswayo's trusted warriors, watched closely. He learned that true power came not only from bravery but from organization and strategy. He began experimenting with new ideas, replacing the long, throwing spear assegai with a short stabbing spear called the iklwa, forcing warriors into close combat. He introduced tight formations known as the bull-horn formation. The chest attacked the enemy head-on, while the horns encircled them from both sides, trapping them. The back line, the loins, served as reserves ready to reinforce or chase fleeing enemies. This was revolutionary. Tribal battles that once ended quickly became massacres. Shaka's brilliance had begun to shine. The seeds of a new order were being planted, and soon, all of southern Africa would feel the tremor of his ambition. The rise of the Zulu Kingdom had begun. Under the Mthethwa chief Dingiswayo, Shaka found both purpose and opportunity. Dingiswayo was unlike other tribal leaders. He believed in unity, order, and the reformation of warfare. He recognized Shaka's brilliance and gave him command of a small regiment. Here, Shaka's leadership shone. He trained his men to perfection. Every movement synchronized, every command obeyed without question. His soldiers respected him, feared him, and worshipped his discipline. When they fought as one living organism, swift, deadly, and precise. Under Dingiswayo's guidance, Shaka's talents blossomed. But destiny is never kind for long. Around 1818, the Mthethwa Confederation faced a brutal rival, the Ndwandwe, led by Chief Zwide. The two powers clashed in one of the bloodiest battles of the region. During the chaos, Dingiswayo was captured and executed by Zwide's warriors. His death shook the Mthethwa alliance to its core. Without his unifying presence, chaos erupted. Many clans panicked, seeking new protection and leadership. It was in this vacuum that Shaka, once a loyal subordinate, emerged as a contender. He saw not only loss but opportunity. The mentor was gone. The student would now shape his own destiny. Shaka Zulu stepped forward to claim his people's future. With Dingiswayo's death, the Mthethwa alliance began to crumble. Shaka gathered the remaining loyal regiments and returned to his father's homeland, the Zulu clan. His father, Senzangakona, had already died, leaving the Zulu leaderless and vulnerable. Seizing the moment, Shaka overthrew his half-brother Sigajana, who had assumed the chieftainship. The coup was swift and brutal. Shaka became chief of the Zulu. At first, they were only a small tribe compared to their neighbors, but under Shaka's leadership, they began to transform into a disciplined military machine. Shaka reorganized society around the army. Every man became a soldier, every woman a supporter of the war effort. The traditional system of kinship and loyalty was replaced by regimental unity and total obedience. Young men were grouped into age-based regiments, living in military barracks called amikanda. They were forbidden to marry until they proved themselves in battle. Shaka trained them relentlessly, marching barefoot across thorny plains, hunting, sparring, and learning to kill without hesitation. His warriors became living weapons, loyal only to him. Word spread quickly across the land of a new power rising from the hills. The Zulu were no longer a small clan, they were becoming an empire. From 1818 to 1820, Shaka launched a series of lightning campaigns against neighboring tribes. His new tactics, the iklwa spear, the bullhorn formation, and the ruthless pursuit of enemies, turned every battle into a slaughter. Tribes that resisted were annihilated. Those who surrendered were absorbed into his growing army. Shaka's goal was not mere conquest, but transformation. He demanded loyalty, discipline, and order above all. To maintain control over his vast and growing dominion, he established a network of loyal chiefs who reported directly to him. He built new military settlements throughout the territory, ensuring his warriors were always battle-ready. His rule was harsh, betrayal meant death, and cowardice was unforgivable. Yet his vision brought stability and unity to a region long divided by endless tribal wars. Shaka's empire grew to encompass hundreds of miles, stretching from the Tugela River to beyond the Pongola. Trade flourished under his rule, and emissaries from European traders began to take notice of this powerful new king. The small clan once mocked and ignored had become the most feared power in southern Africa. The age of Shaka Zulu had begun, and the world was about to learn his name. By the early 1820s, Shaka Zulu had already turned his small clan into a rising kingdom, but he knew that power without order was chaos. He envisioned a nation united not by bloodlines or tribal loyalties, but by discipline and obedience, a new identity that transcended clan divisions. From this vision emerged the Impi, Shaka's revolutionary army system. Every young man of fighting age was drafted into the Impi, trained from dawn till dusk in endurance, combat, and formation tactics. Unlike the disorganized skirmishes of the past, the Impi fought with precision, unity, and terrifying aggression. They were taught to move silently, to attack swiftly, and to obey without hesitation. Their iconic iklwa, a short stabbing spear with a broad blade, forced them into close combat, where courage and skill decided life or death. Shaka replaced the long cowhide shields with heavier oval shields that provided full-body protection, creating a wall of defense during battle. When the Impi marched, the ground shook under their synchronized steps. Their chants and war songs echoed through the valleys, a sound that made rival tribes tremble. The Zulu army was not just an army. It was a new way of life. Every man lived, breathed, and died for Shaka. Shaka's military settlements, known as Amakanda, were more than just barracks. They were centers of power, discipline, and control. Built in circular formations with thousands of huts surrounding an open parade ground. These fortresses housed regiments of unmarried men and served as both training camps and military communities. Daily life inside the Amakanda was strict and relentless. Warriors rose before sunrise, practiced weapon drills, formation marches, and mock battles for hours. Laziness was punished harshly, and cowardice was a disgrace worse than death. Even rest was controlled. Warriors were not allowed to marry or own property until they had proven their valor in Shaka's wars. Food was rationed, primarily meat and milk, ensuring strength and stamina. Festivals were rare, reserved only for great victories. Through this system, Shaka created a culture of loyalty and brotherhood. His soldiers called themselves the children of the king. When the king summoned them, they came running, barefoot, across the plains, ready to fight or die. The Amakanda also served as centers of governance and intelligence, where spies brought news from conquered lands. This network kept Shaka informed of every whisper and movement across his empire. Every warrior was both soldier and servant of the Zulu nation, bound by oaths of loyalty and fear of their king's wrath. Shaka believed that only through hardship could greatness be achieved. To ensure his army's invincibility, he imposed punishments so severe that even his enemies marveled at their effects. If a warrior fled from battle, his entire regiment could be executed. If a commander failed to achieve victory, he was often speared in front of his men as an example. Shaka demanded absolute bravery. A soldier who returned without his shield or spear was killed immediately. To build endurance, his warriors were forbidden to wear sandals. They marched barefoot over thorns, rocks, and burning ground, toughening their feet into leather. They were expected to travel up to 50 miles a day without food or rest. This extreme discipline created soldiers who were not merely men but living weapons. Their synchronization in battle was legendary. They could charge, pivot, and surround an enemy with perfect coordination. Shaka turned war into an art form, swift, ruthless, and strategic. The Zulu Impi became unstoppable, crushing every tribe that stood in their path. Each victory brought more recruits, more resources, and more fear. Yet beneath the glory and the triumph, shadows began to form, for such power came at a price, and the kingdom built on blood and terror would one day face the same fury it unleashed upon others. The greatest challenge to Shaka's growing power came from the Ndwandwe, led by the fierce and ambitious Chief Zwide. For years, the Ndwandwe had been the dominant force in the region, ruling through fear and brutal raids. They viewed the rise of the Zulu as an insult to their supremacy. Zwide's spies brought word of Shaka's new tactics, his disciplined warriors, and his expanding territory. He mocked Shaka as a former herd boy pretending to be a king, but mockery would soon turn into terror. The conflict between the Ndwandwe and the Zulu was inevitable, a collision of two powerful visions for control of the same land. In 1819, Zwide's army invaded Zulu territory, outnumbering Shaka's forces nearly 2-1. But Shaka's brilliance lay not in numbers, but in strategy. He lured the Ndwandwe into a narrow valley near the Mlatu's River, where their superior numbers became useless. As the Ndwandwe forces advanced, the Zulu used the bull horn formation. The center held the enemy in place, while the flanks encircled them in silence. When the horns closed, chaos erupted. Warriors clashed at close range, stabbing and screaming in a frenzy of blood and dust. By nightfall, the ground was littered with corpses. Zwide's army was destroyed. Only a few survivors escaped to tell the tale. The Ndwandwe kingdom shattered, and many of its remnants fled northward, spreading war and migration across southern Africa. A movement historians now call them Fikane, or the Crushing. Shaka had not just defeated a rival, he had reshaped the map of an entire continent. After the destruction of the Ndwandwe, Shaka stood as the undisputed master of southeastern Africa. Tribe after tribe came under his rule, some by conquest, others by alliance or surrender. He absorbed their people into his regiments, reorganized their lands, and demanded loyalty to the Zulu crown. His empire grew rapidly, stretching from the Drakensberg Mountains to the Indian Ocean. Every region contributed warriors, cattle, and labor, turning the Zulu Kingdom into a thriving machine of power and wealth. Shaka personally led his campaigns, moving with terrifying speed. His army struck like lightning, silent, efficient, and unstoppable. Villages burned, enemies fled, and entire populations were relocated to strengthen his central authority. Shaka also transformed governance. He established a centralized system where all chiefs answered directly to him. Messengers carried his commands across the kingdom, and no decision, large or small, escaped his notice. Those who disobeyed met swift punishment. Yet Shaka was more than a conqueror. He was also a nation builder. He enforced trade routes, controlled the flow of cattle, and maintained peace among the clans that had once fought endlessly. Foreign traders, including Portuguese and British merchants from the coast, began to hear rumors of a powerful king who ruled with both brilliance and terror. To them, Shaka was a mystery, a man capable of both ruthless slaughter and strategic genius. Within only a few years, the Zulu Kingdom had become one of the greatest powers in Africa, a state forged by blood, bound by discipline, and led by a man whose vision knew no limits. While Shaka's victories brought unity to his people, they also unleashed devastation far beyond his borders. The fall of the Ndwandwe scattered countless refugees north and west, igniting a chain reaction of displacement and warfare known as the Mfikane. Tribes fleeing Shaka's power clashed with others in their path, destroying old kingdoms and creating new ones. Entire regions were depopulated as people fled from the unstoppable Zulu war machine. Some groups, like the Ngoni, migrated as far north as present-day Malawi and Tanzania, carrying Shaka's military tactics with them. The lands of southern Africa were forever changed. Rivers ran red, villages burned, and survivors wandered homeless across the plains. Shaka's influence, though indirect, reshaped the destiny of millions. To his followers, this was proof of his greatness. He had brought strength, unity, and order, but to his enemies, he was the embodiment of terror itself. Even among his own people, whispers began to spread of his temper, his executions, and his growing paranoia. The Zulu Empire had reached its height, but the seeds of future darkness were already sown. For power built on fear is never stable, and the man who united the tribes of Africa would soon find that ruling them was far more dangerous than conquering them. The age of expansion was ending. The age of blood would soon begin. By the early 1820s, Shaka Zulu's empire was vast and powerful, a realm born from conquest, blood, and unshakable discipline. But maintaining such a kingdom required more than just strength. It required control, intelligence, and fear. Shaka ruled his people like a god-king, his word absolute and unquestionable. He was both admired and dreaded, a man of impossible contradictions. Brilliant yet ruthless, visionary yet merciless. Every village within his dominion paid tribute to him. Cattle, grain, and laborers were sent to his royal capital at Bulawayo, where his great kraal stood, a circular fortress housing his elite regiments and royal court. There, messengers arrived daily, carrying reports from across the empire. No decision, no rumor, no conflict went unnoticed by the king. His spies, the Isandlwana, roamed the land, ensuring that loyalty to the Zulu crown was absolute. Shaka's presence alone commanded awe. When he appeared in public, adorned with leopard skins and wielding his iconic spear, thousands would kneel in silence. His eyes were said to pierce through men's souls, able to sense deceit or hesitation. But beneath this grandeur lay a constant fear of betrayal. Shaka trusted no one completely, not even his closest commanders. The same discipline that had built the Zulu army now became the iron cage of his own rule. Anyone suspected of disloyalty, even slightly, was executed. Sometimes entire families wiped out to prevent vengeance. The Lion King sat on a throne of iron, but every victory weighed heavier on his spirit. Power, he discovered, demanded sacrifice beyond imagination. As the Zulu Kingdom grew, so did its complexity. Shaka understood that to sustain his empire, he needed an efficient system of governance that could manage both military and civilian life. He reorganized his realm into provinces, each ruled by trusted Isandlwana, chiefs appointed not by blood, but by merit and loyalty. These men were extensions of Shaka's will, responsible for collecting tribute, maintaining order, and preparing warriors for battle. The Amakanda military settlements became centers of both administration and military readiness. Each regiment had its own farmlands, cattle, and herders. This allowed the army to feed itself and remain independent of traditional village structures. Trade routes were monitored, ensuring that goods flowed smoothly between regions. Shaka also imposed strict social codes. Ceremonies, marriages, and festivals required his approval. This centralized control gave him an almost supernatural authority, making him the heart of the nation. Yet Shaka was not without diplomacy. He sent emissaries to the Portuguese at Delagoa Bay, trading ivory and hides for European goods such as cloth and beads. He sought to understand the outsiders' technology and motives. Though intrigued by firearms, he saw them as slow and unreliable compared to the speed of the iklwa spear. His army was faster, quieter, and deadlier. The Zulu state, under Shaka's leadership, became a living machine, efficient, fearsome, and united under one purpose: his vision of eternal strength. But in such a system, there was no room for weakness, and compassion was seen as betrayal. Power isolated Shaka, As his kingdom prospered, his mind began to darken. The pressures of leadership, endless wars, and constant paranoia turned him into a man haunted by ghosts, both real and imagined. He began to see treachery in every corner. His commanders feared his temper, for a single word of displeasure could mean death. Shaka's punishments became increasingly brutal: impalements, executions by spear, and mass killings of those he suspected of disloyalty. Yet, for all his cruelty, his people still revered him. They believed he was chosen by the ancestors, destined to lead the Zulu to greatness. Then tragedy struck. In 1827, his beloved mother, Nandi, the woman who had stood by him through exile and hardship, died of illness. Her death shattered Shaka's already fragile psyche. Overcome with grief, he declared a period of mourning so extreme that it scarred the nation. No crops were to be planted, no milk was to be drunk, and anyone found smiling or showing joy was executed. Thousands perished during this time. Cattle were slaughtered needlessly, and villages starved. The once mighty king became a shadow of himself, consumed by sorrow and madness. His people began to whisper that the gods had abandoned him, that the spirit of his mother had taken his sanity with her. The empire he had built with brilliance and blood now trembled under the weight of his grief. The Lion King was wounded, and the vultures of betrayal were beginning to circle. After the death of his mother, Nandi, in 1827, Shaka's mind descended into darkness. The grief that might break an ordinary man became a storm that consumed a king. For Shaka, Nandi had not been merely a mother. She was the only person who had ever shown him unconditional love. Her passing reopened every wound from his childhood: the rejection, the mockery, the loneliness. He began to see her spirit everywhere, haunting his sleep and whispering in the winds. His palace became a place of mourning, not power. He ordered his people to weep day and night for a year. His madness took monstrous forms. No crops were to be planted during the mourning period. Those who disobeyed were executed. All cows that produced milk were slaughtered, as he declared that no child should drink while he grieved for the mother who had fed him. Thousands starved across the land. Entire villages fell silent from hunger and disease. Shaka's court, once the heart of the Zulu Kingdom, became a theater of terror. He executed servants, advisors, and even friends on the slightest suspicion of disloyalty. The warriors who had once shouted his name in battle now trembled before him. The mighty Lion King had turned into a predator that devoured his own pride. The people who had once worshipped him now whispered prayers for deliverance in secret. Shaka's empire was still vast and feared, but its soul was bleeding. His brilliance, which had forged the kingdom, was now tearing it apart. By 1828, the once unbreakable loyalty of the Zulu people began to fracture. Many of Shaka's generals, men who had followed him through years of war, now feared that his madness would destroy everything they had built. His half-brothers, Dingane and Mlangana, who had long lived in his shadow, watched with both fear and ambition. They saw how Shaka's decisions became increasingly erratic. He executed entire regiments for imagined conspiracies. He ordered mass killings of women and children accused of witchcraft. His paranoia deepened to the point where he no longer trusted anyone to approach him unarmed. Meanwhile, the kingdom suffered. With fields untended and herds slaughtered, famine spread. Trade declined as neighboring tribes avoided contact with the unstable monarch. The once great army that had conquered the region began to weaken, not from battle, but from starvation and despair. Shaka's enemies, both within and beyond his borders, sensed his vulnerability. The neighboring Ndwandwe remnants and other displaced tribes regrouped, waiting for a chance to strike back. Dingain and Mlangana began to conspire in secret, joined by Shaka's trusted bodyguard, Mbofa. They knew that Shaka's reign, once a source of pride, had become a curse. But killing the great king was no simple act. It was treason against a living legend. They planned carefully, waiting for a moment when Shaka would be unguarded and distracted. Every day, the tension grew heavier, the fear thicker. Shaka, though brilliant, was blinded by grief. He could sense the whispers of betrayal but dismissed them, believing himself immortal, chosen by the spirits. Yet even kings who believe they are gods cannot escape the reach of human treachery. The lion's roar was fading, and the hunters were closing in. On a cool day in late September 1828, Shaka Zulu stood near his kraal at Quadakuza, speaking with his attendants. His thoughts were still clouded by paranoia and sorrow. His two half-brothers, Dingain and Mlangana, approached him with forced smiles and respectful greetings. They came under the pretense of discussing matters of the kingdom. Beside them stood Mbofa, Shaka's trusted guard, the man who had protected him for years. As the conversation continued, Mbofa stepped behind the king. Then, without warning, he struck. His spear plunged into Shaka's side. Shocked, the king turned, his eyes wide in disbelief. "Are you killing me, dogs of my house?" he cried. Dingain and Mlangana joined in, stabbing him again and again until the mighty Shaka fell to the ground. The great king of the Zulu lay dying, his blood soaking the earth he had conquered. Legends say his final words were a curse and a prophecy, that his people would one day be ruled by strangers, and his spirit would never rest. The conspirators buried his body in secret, hiding the grave so that no one could find it. Some say it was beneath the cattle kraal. Others believe it was in an unmarked spot outside the royal enclosure. No one truly knows. With Shaka's death, an era ended. The Zulu Kingdom lost its founding genius, the man who had united a continent under his vision of power and discipline. But even in death, his legacy endured. His name became legend, his tactics studied by generations of warriors. The Lion King was gone, but the echo of his roar would shake the earth for centuries to come. When the spear of betrayal silenced Shaka Zulu, the throne passed not to an heir of greatness, but to a brother forged in fear. Dingain Kasanzangakona, who had helped orchestrate the assassination, stepped forward to seize control of the empire. The once mighty Zulu Kingdom stood in shock, its god king dead, its people uncertain. But Dingain acted swiftly. He presented himself as the savior of the nation, promising to end the madness and restore balance after the years of terror under Shaka's grief-stricken rule. The weary people welcomed his words, desperate for peace. At first, Dingain's reign appeared to bring relief. The endless executions stopped, and the harsh mourning laws were lifted. Crops were planted again, herds were rebuilt, and the drums of war fell silent. Dingain moved the royal capital from Quadakuza to a new site called Umgungan Lovu, meaning the secret place of the elephant. There, he built a grand kraal, larger than any before it, symbolizing his power and stability. But beneath this calm exterior, Dingain's heart was restless. He feared enemies both seen and unseen, rivals among Shaka's old generals, vengeful chiefs from conquered tribes, and even his own brother Mlangana, who had shared in Shaka's murder. Within months, Dingain ordered Mlangana's death to secure his rule. The blood of his brother stained his crown, but he felt safer. Unlike Shaka, Dingain lacked the genius of strategy and the iron discipline of leadership. He ruled through suspicion, charm, and deceit. He sought to maintain the empire by fear rather than reform. The Zulu Kingdom under his reign would not rise higher. Instead, it would face the most dangerous challenge in its history, the coming of white settlers from the south. In the late 1830s, new figures began to appear on the edges of the Zulu Kingdom, men with wagons, oxen, and strange weapons that spat fire. These were the Boers, Dutch-speaking settlers migrating northward from the Cape Colony in search of land and independence. They were led by men like Piet Retief and Andries Pretorius, who believed that the lands of Natal were destined to be theirs. At first, contact between the Boers and the Zulu was cautious. The Boers were impressed by the Zulus' discipline and strength, while the Zulu were curious about these pale-skinned strangers with thundersticks and wagons. Dingaan saw an opportunity. He believed he could use the Boers to his advantage. If he could ally with them, he might strengthen his rule and gain access to their guns. When Piet Retief and his followers arrived at Umgungundlovu in 1838, Dingaan welcomed them with hospitality. The Boers requested land in Natal for their new settlement. Dingaan agreed, but on one condition. He demanded that the Boers recover cattle stolen by a rival chief. Retief agreed and successfully completed the task, returning the cattle as a gesture of goodwill. Dingaan appeared pleased and invited Retief and his men to his royal kraal for a celebration. The air was filled with song and dance. Retief and his party were told to leave their guns outside, as was the Zulu custom when meeting the king. It seemed like the beginning of peace between two powerful nations. Yet, beneath the smiles, Dingaan's mind was at war with suspicion and fear. He saw the Boers not as allies, but as invaders who would one day steal his land, his people, and his throne. The next morning, on February 6, 1838, tragedy unfolded. As the sun rose over the kraal, Dingaan called the Boers before him. They came unarmed, trusting in the king's hospitality. Then, with a single command, Bulelani Abathakathi, kill the wizards! Chaos erupted. Hundreds of Zulu warriors surged forward, seizing Retief and his men. The Boers were dragged up the hill outside the kraal, where they were executed one by one. Retief himself was said to have been the last to die, watching helplessly as his followers were slaughtered. His body was later found alongside his men, their skulls crushed, their remains left for the vultures. In his hand was a folded document, the treaty that Dingaan had signed, granting the Boers land, now stained with blood. Dingaan's fury did not stop there. He ordered his regiments to attack the Boer encampments along the Bloekrans River, killing men, women, and children in a devastating massacre. Hundreds perished. To Dingaan, this was victory, a warning that no foreign power could claim Zulu land. But the Boers, armed and organized, were not so easily crushed. News of the massacre spread quickly, and the survivors vowed revenge. Led by Andries Pretorius, they gathered their forces, prepared their wagons, and advanced into Zulu territory. What followed would become one of the most famous and bloodiest clashes in South African history, the Battle of Blood River, where the fate of the Zulu Kingdom would hang in the balance, and the legacy of Shaka's empire would face its greatest test. The dawn of December 16, 1838, painted the African sky in shades of red, a crimson omen for what was to come. On one side stood the Zulu warriors of Dingaan, numbering nearly 20,000, armed with spears, shields, and courage inherited from Shaka's legacy. On the other side, only 464 Boer commandos led by Andries Pretorius, their wagons arranged in a tight defensive circle on the banks of the Nkum River. Between them stretched silence, broken only by the distant cry of vultures circling above. For hours, the Boers waited behind their wagons, praying and preparing their gunpowder. They had made a solemn vow: if God granted them victory, they would honor the day forever as holy. The Zulu regiments advanced in waves, chanting war songs, their shields flashing in the sunlight. When the first ranks charged, the Boers opened fire. Gunfire thundered through the valley, cutting down the front lines. Still, the Zulu pressed forward bravely, filling the gaps with fresh warriors. The air became thick with smoke and dust, the sound of bullets and screams merging into a storm of chaos. But the Boers' discipline and weapons proved devastating. Their circle of wagons, the laager, became a fortress. Every Zulu assault was met with a wall of fire. After hours of relentless battle, the river itself ran red with the blood of fallen warriors, earning the name Blood River. Over 3,000 Zulus lay dead, while not a single Boer was killed. The victory broke Dingane's military strength and shattered his power over the land. The Boers gave thanks, keeping their vow by dedicating the day to God, what would later become known in South African history as the Day of the Vow. For the Zulu Kingdom, it marked not only defeat, but the beginning of a storm that would reshape their destiny forever. In the aftermath of Blood River, Dingane's kingdom was in turmoil. His once mighty army was shattered, his regiments scattered, and his people questioning the will of their king. The great elephant that Shaka had built was bleeding from within. Dingane tried to rally what remained of his forces, but the spirit of unity that once defined the Zulu had faded. Chiefs whispered in secret that the gods had turned against him. Farmers refused tribute. Warriors deserted their posts. The Boers, now allied with some of Dingane's rivals, pushed deeper into Zulu territory. Among those rivals was Mpand Kasanzangakona, another brother of Shaka and Dingane. Unlike his ambitious brothers, Mpand had survived the years of chaos by staying quiet and loyal, at least outwardly. But now, seeing the kingdom crumbling, Mpand saw his chance. He defected from Dingane and allied himself with the Boers, offering them support in exchange for help in claiming the throne. The Boers agreed, recognizing that a weaker and friendlier Zulu king would serve their interests better. As Pretorius and Mpand's combined forces advanced, Dingane's warriors met them in a desperate final stand at Magongo Hill in 1840. The battle was fierce but short. Dingane's army, already demoralized and exhausted, could not withstand the combined assault. His kraal was captured and burned, his followers scattered. Dingane fled north, seeking refuge among the Swazi. But even there, his past caught up to him. Betrayed by those he trusted, Dingane was eventually killed, beaten to death by his own allies. The man who had slain his brother and ruled through deceit met an end as violent as his rise. The reign of terror was over, and a new chapter in Zulu history began under the cautious leadership of Mpand. When Mpand became king in 1840, the Zulu Kingdom was a shadow of its former glory. Years of war, betrayal, and bloodshed had torn the land apart. Yet, Mpand was not a warrior like Shaka or a schemer like Dingane. He was a survivor, patient, pragmatic, and skilled in diplomacy. His goal was not to conquer but to heal. He rebuilt the royal kraals, reorganized the regiments, and restored order among the scattered clans. Under his reign, the Zulu began to recover from the wounds of war. Crops were planted again, trade with neighboring tribes resumed, and peace, long lost, slowly returned. Mpand understood the new reality. The Boers and the British were now permanent forces in the region. Instead of challenging them, he sought to coexist. He allowed missionaries and traders to enter Zulu territory, learning about the strange customs and weapons of the white men. Still, Mpand remained wary. He maintained a powerful army, ready to defend his people if ever threatened. For the first time in decades, Zulu mothers could raise their children without fear of endless wars. But beneath this peace, tensions simmered. Mpand had many sons and rivalry brewed among them, especially between Cetshwayo, the ambitious warrior prince, and his half-brother Mbiyazi, who enjoyed Mpand's favor. The Zulu Kingdom, though stable on the surface, stood once again on the edge of internal conflict. And beyond its borders, the shadow of British expansion grew ever longer. The empire that Shaka had built and Dingaan had nearly destroyed would soon face its greatest trial yet, the war against the most powerful empire in the world. By the mid-1850s, the Zulu Kingdom had found peace under the cautious leadership of King Mpande Kasanzangakona. The long years of chaos had ended. The fields were green again, and the drums of war had grown silent. Yet, beneath this fragile calm, new tensions were taking root. Mpande, now old and heavy with age, had many sons, but two stood above the rest, Cetshwayo and Mbiyazi. Cetshwayo, the elder, was strong, intelligent, and respected by the warriors. He carried the spirit of Shaka in his blood, bold, strategic, and unafraid to lead from the front. Mbiyazi, younger and favored by their father, was gentle, diplomatic, and more comfortable among the royal courtiers than on the battlefield. The kingdom whispered of rivalry. Warriors pledged their loyalty to Cetshwayo, believing him to be the true heir to Shaka's legacy. Meanwhile, the royal advisors surrounded Mbiyazi, convincing Mpande that his younger son was better suited to rule in an age of peace. As the tension grew, the royal kraal of Ndwengu became a place of intrigue and secret plotting. Each feast, each ceremony, carried a hidden current of suspicion. Brothers eyed each other across the firelight, knowing that the Zulu throne could never be shared. Cetshwayo tried to avoid open conflict for years, out of respect for his aging father. But whispers of conspiracy reached him, rumors that Mbiyazi planned to have him assassinated and seize the regiments that still swore loyalty to the older prince. For Cetshwayo, there could be no greater dishonor than dying without a fight. And so, as the rains of 1856 fell over the plains of Zululand, the drums of war began to thunder once again. The peace that Mpande had built was about to be drowned in blood. The day of reckoning came on December 2nd, 1856, near the banks of the Tugela River, at a place called Ndondakusuka. The air was thick with anticipation. Two royal armies faced each other, brothers leading brothers, fathers watching sons. On one side, Cetshwayo's regiments, seasoned and disciplined, their shields black as night. On the other, Mbiyazi's younger, less experienced warriors wearing feathers of bright red. The king himself, Mpande, remained behind the lines, torn between his two sons. As dawn broke, the first horns sounded. The ground trembled beneath the feet of tens of thousands of warriors. Cetshwayo's army advanced in the traditional bullhorn formation that Shaka had perfected decades earlier. His warriors moved like a living wave, disciplined, united, and fierce. Mbiyazi's men fought bravely but were quickly overwhelmed. The battle raged for hours, a storm of spears, shields, and blood. The cries of the dying echoed across the river. When it was over, the ground was red with the blood of princes and brothers. Mbiyazi and 5 of Mpande's sons were killed, their bodies lost among the slain. Cetshwayo's victory was absolute, but it came at a terrible cost. Thousands of lives were lost in a single day, one of the bloodiest civil wars in Zulu history. When news reached Mpande, the old king wept bitterly. He mourned the death of his sons, yet he knew the kingdom could not survive without a strong ruler. In his heart, he accepted the inevitable Cetshwayo, the Lion of Zululand, would one day inherit the throne. But the victory also carried a shadow. For the first time, the Zulu had turned their spears upon themselves. The unity that Shaka had forged in fire had been broken by blood. And beyond the river, the British colonists were watching, studying the powerful Zulu nation and waiting for their moment to strike. In the years that followed the Battle of Ndondakusuka, Cetshwayo ruled unofficially as co-king beside his aging father. Though Mpande still sat upon the throne, real power now lay in Cetshwayo's hands. He rebuilt the army, reorganized the regiments, and restored discipline among the warriors. The nation that had been wounded by civil war began to rise again under his command. He revived the spirit of Shaka's military system: strict training, ceremonial reviews, and iron discipline. The young warriors, eager for glory, looked to him as the true heir of the Zulu Empire. Yet outside Zululand, change was sweeping across southern Africa. The British Empire, expanding from the Cape Colony, was tightening its grip on the region. They viewed the Zulu Kingdom as both a threat and an obstacle to their dream of total control over the land. British traders, missionaries, and officials began to cross the Tugela River, claiming to bring civilization. But their real mission was to prepare the ground for conquest. Cetshwayo saw through their intentions. He respected the British for their discipline and power, but distrusted their motives. He warned his chiefs, "The white man comes with words of peace, but his heart seeks our land." To protect his people, he strengthened the army even further, ordering that every able man be trained and ready. The regiments, dressed in black and red, once again filled the plains of KwaZulu, their chants echoing through the valleys. The old warriors whispered that the ghost of Shaka was walking among them again. When King Pan died in 1872, Cetshwayo was crowned the rightful ruler of the Zulu nation. His reign began with hope, a vision to preserve Zulu independence in a changing world. But the drums of destiny were already beating in the distance. The British Empire, hungry for land and power, was preparing for war. The stage was set for the greatest and bloodiest conflict the Zulu Kingdom would ever face: the Anglo-Zulu War. By the early 1870s, the British Empire had solidified control over much of southern Africa. Their eyes now turned to Zulu territory, one of the last independent African kingdoms. The Zulu, under King Cetshwayo, had maintained a powerful, disciplined army, feared across the region. To the British, this presented both a challenge and an opportunity. They claimed that the Zulu were uncivilized and a threat to colonial expansion, justifying an invasion in the name of order and progress. Yet, beneath their political rhetoric, greed for fertile land and strategic dominance was the true motive. In 1879, British forces under Lord Chelmsford crossed the Tugela River into Zululand. The invading army was equipped with rifles, artillery, and advanced military technology, weapons that could decimate any unprepared foe. They marched confidently, underestimating the disciplined Zulu regiments, who were far from primitive in their tactics. Cetshwayo, understanding the threat, prepared his army meticulously. The regiments were organized, warriors drilled in the bullhorn formation, and spies were sent to monitor British movements. The Zulu warriors, armed with iklwa spears and shields, combined speed, precision, and coordination, the legacy of Shaka's genius adapted for modern battle. The British advanced, believing that their superior firepower would guarantee victory. Their confidence was absolute. Yet they failed to understand the terrain, the intelligence of their enemy, and the sheer speed of the Zulu army. Cetshwayo knew that a frontal assault by a disciplined Zulu force could destroy even the best-trained colonial troops. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shock the world, a battle where courage, strategy, and determination would clash with empire, guns, and modernity. On January 22, 1879, history was made at Isandlwana Hill. Lord Chelmsford divided his forces, leaving one column to establish camp at the base of the hill, believing the Zulu would not dare attack. Cetshwayo's general Nshingwayo Kamahole saw the opportunity. He assembled over 20,000 warriors and advanced swiftly, using the classic bullhorn formation. The Zulu army split into three components: the chest, which engaged the British front; the horns, which encircled the enemy from both flanks; and the loins, acting as reserves ready to exploit weaknesses. The Zulu warriors moved silently through the tall grass, closing the distance with remarkable speed. When the attack began, chaos erupted in the British camp. The soldiers, trained for linear European warfare, were overwhelmed by the swift, coordinated charge. Spears clashed with rifles, shields absorbed bullets, and warriors penetrated deep into the camp. The British tried to form defensive lines, but the Zulus' encirclement rendered it impossible. Within hours, over 1,300 British soldiers were killed, including officers who could not escape the carnage. The victory stunned the world. Isandlwana became a symbol of Zulu bravery, military brilliance, and the enduring genius of Shaka's tactics. Word of the massacre spread quickly, shaking the British Empire's confidence. Cetshwayo's name echoed beyond Africa, a king who had defeated a modern army with discipline, courage, and strategy. Yet the triumph came at a price. Despite the victory, the Zulu army could not destroy all British forces, and the Empire's logistical strength meant reinforcements were always on the way. The war had only begun, and a greater test was coming, at Rorke's Drift, where a tiny British garrison would face an impossible siege. Following the disaster at Isandlwana, a small British mission station at Rorke's Drift became the next focal point. Only 150 soldiers were stationed there, tasked with defending a supply depot and hospital. The Zulu warriors, numbering over 4,000, advanced with relentless determination. Cetshwayo's generals saw this as an opportunity to further crush British morale. The battle began in the evening of January 22, 1879. The Zulu attacked in waves, trying to breach the perimeter and overwhelm the defenders with sheer numbers. The British held their ground, using firepower, barricades, and clever positioning to repel the attackers. Spears struck against fortified walls, while gunfire tore through the charging warriors. The battle stretched through the night, a desperate test of courage, endurance, and strategy. The defenders were outnumbered nearly 30-1, yet their discipline allowed them to hold every assault. By morning, the Zulu retreated, leaving over 350 dead on the field. The British suffered 17 fatalities, a remarkable testament to their defensive tactics, but it also highlighted the Zulus' extraordinary bravery and persistence. Rorke's Drift became legendary in military history, celebrated in British accounts as an example of heroism, while Zulu accounts remembered it as a demonstration of resilience and unyielding courage. For Cetshwayo, it was a strategic setback, but not a defeat of his army. The Zulu Kingdom had proven its strength against one of the most powerful empires in the world. The war was far from over, and the struggle between the Zulu warriors and the British would escalate into a series of battles that would determine the fate of an entire nation. After the shock of Isandlwana and the desperate defense at Rorke's Drift, the British Empire could no longer underestimate the Zulu Kingdom. Reinforcements poured into southern Africa, with thousands of soldiers, artillery, and supplies arriving from the Cape Colony and beyond. Lord Chelmsford reorganized the British forces into well-supplied columns capable of advancing into the heart of Zululand. Their objective was clear: destroy the Zulu military machine, dismantle the regiments, and force King Cetshwayo into submission. Cetshwayo, aware of the overwhelming odds, sought to mobilize his army in the traditional Zulu way. Tens of thousands of warriors were gathered from every corner of Zululand, prepared to defend their homeland with courage and ferocity. The king employed the same tactics that had defeated European forces at Isandlwana: encirclement, disciplined assault formations, and rapid, coordinated attacks. But this time, the British were prepared. They had learned from their earlier mistakes. Fortified camps, coordinated supply lines, and devastating artillery that could shatter even the strongest Zulu formations. The war became a test of endurance, strategy, and adaptation. Every clash, from Kambula to Ulundi, reflected the clash of two worlds, one ancient and disciplined, the other modern, technologically advanced, and ruthless. The Zulu, while brave and cunning, began to suffer heavy casualties. The regiments that had once moved like a single organism were now fragmented. Cetshwayo faced a terrifying dilemma: fight and risk annihilation, or retreat and preserve his people. The British advance was relentless, and Zululand itself was under siege. Villages were burned, crops destroyed, and civilians caught in the crossfire. The once unified kingdom teetered on the edge of collapse. By July 1879, the British forces had captured Ulundi, the royal capital. The Zulu kraal, once the vibrant center of a proud empire, was reduced to smoldering ruins. Cetshwayo fled with a loyal guard, retreating into the northern hills of Zululand, seeking refuge among his people. For weeks, the British pursued him relentlessly. Using intelligence from local allies and former Zulu chiefs who had defected, they tracked the king's movements with deadly precision. Eventually, Cetshwayo was captured and placed under British custody. He was exiled to Cape Town, far from his homeland, stripped of the power he had inherited and fought so fiercely to defend. The Zulu people mourned, but the empire he had led was already fractured. The regiments were disbanded, the villages pillaged, and the land divided. The British imposed treaties and governance that undermined the traditional Zulu hierarchy. Cetshwayo's exile marked the symbolic end of Zulu independence, though his name and legacy continued to inspire resistance. Despite captivity, Cetshwayo remained a figure of dignity and strength. He sought to negotiate with the British to ensure some autonomy for his people, emphasizing that the Zulu were not mere subjects but a proud nation. His pleas were partially successful. The British allowed him to return to Zululand years later, but under strict oversight. The age of the great Zulu Kingdom, the empire built by Shaka and hardened by Cetshwayo's discipline, had passed. Yet the memory of its warriors, victories, and resilience would live on in oral history, legend, and the hearts of the people. The fall of the Zulu Kingdom did not mean the disappearance of the Zulu spirit. Even in defeat, the nation retained its identity, military traditions, and cultural cohesion. Cetshwayo's return from exile in 1883 allowed him to reign as a symbolic leader, though real power was fragmented among rival chiefs and under British influence. The legacy of Shaka's military genius and Cetshwayo's leadership continued to shape Zulu society. Oral histories recount the courage of the warriors at Isandlwana, the heroism at Rorke's Drift, and the endurance of the nation through civil war and colonial invasion. Zulu regiments continued to train in traditional methods, preserving the tactical innovations of the past. Even under colonial rule, the spirit of Shaka's vision, a united, disciplined, and proud people, remained. Schools, songs, and ceremonies celebrated their history, ensuring that the story of a small nation rising to challenge the might of an empire was never forgotten. The Anglo-Zulu War, while devastating, became a symbol of resistance against imperialism. Cetshwayo's courage, strategic mind, and dignity in exile cemented his place as one of Africa's greatest leaders. Shaka's original vision, once nearly destroyed by internal and external forces, lived on through generations. The empire may have fallen, but the heart of Zululand, its warriors, traditions, and legends, survived. The roar of the lion never truly died. The Anglo-Zulu War left Zululand shattered. With the capture and exile of Cetshwayo, the British Empire imposed a new order on the land. Zululand, once a unified kingdom under a single monarch, was divided into 13 chiefdoms, each ruled by leaders chosen or approved by the British authorities. This strategy was deliberate: divide and rule. By fragmenting the once powerful kingdom, The British ensured that no single leader could unite the Zulu people against colonial expansion. These chiefdoms, often led by rivals of Cetshwayo or compliant allies of the empire, struggled to maintain control. Traditional regiments were disbanded, and the discipline and cohesion that had made the Zulu army so formidable were dismantled. British soldiers patrolled the land, enforcing new taxes, monitoring local governance, and suppressing uprisings. The old royal kraals, including Ulundi, were destroyed or repurposed, erasing symbols of Zulu authority. Many villages suffered further as British policies favored European settlers and farming interests over local needs. Despite these pressures, the people of Zululand resisted cultural erasure. Chiefs maintained traditional ceremonies, dances, and military drills in secret. Oral histories were preserved, ensuring that stories of Shaka, Dingaan, Mpand, and Cetshwayo were passed from one generation to the next. While political autonomy was lost, the identity of the Zulu nation remained strong, bound by memory, song, and the enduring pride of warriors who had once conquered the continent and challenged an empire. After years in exile in Cape Town, Cetshwayo was allowed to return to Zululand in 1883. Though his return was celebrated by many Zulu, the reality of his power was limited. The British ensured that he could rule only over a portion of the territory, controlling some districts under colonial oversight while other chiefdoms were led by rivals loyal to the empire. The Zulu king now held ceremonial influence rather than absolute authority. Cetshwayo worked tirelessly to restore stability. He encouraged the revival of traditional structures, reorganized loyal regiments, and mediated disputes among the fragmented chiefdoms. Yet challenges were constant. Rival chiefs resented his presence, the British monitored his actions, and the land itself had been altered by years of war and colonial settlement. Despite these obstacles, Cetshwayo's return symbolized the resilience of the Zulu nation. He insisted on upholding the cultural and military traditions that had defined the kingdom for generations. Even with his diminished political authority, Cetshwayo remained a unifying figure. His presence reminded the Zulu people of the kingdom's former glory and instilled pride in the young warriors who still trained with the iconic iklwa spears and shields. He represented the continuity of Shaka's vision: discipline, courage, and unity under a single leadership, even in exile and under foreign rule. For many Zulu, Cetshwayo's return was a testament that no empire, however powerful, could erase the memory of their great kings or the legacy of a people who had once defied the world's most powerful armies. Despite political fragmentation, the Zulu people preserved their identity through culture, oral tradition, and social structures. Initiation rites, such as the Umkosi Wokashwama, first fruit ceremony, continued to be observed secretly or in defiance of colonial authorities. Young men trained as warriors, learning the same formations and tactics that had once made Shaka's army legendary. Songs, stories, and dances commemorated the victories, defeats, and heroes of the past. Elders passed down stories of Shaka's discipline, Cetshwayo's leadership, and the courage of warriors at battles like Isandlwana and Rorke's Drift. Zululand's landscape itself held memory. Sacred hills, river crossings, and battle sites were revered, marking the history of triumph and tragedy. Even under the shadow of British administration, the Zulu people maintained communal structures, governed by customary law, and continued the age-old relationship between chiefs and clans. While they were politically constrained, their cultural autonomy allowed the nation to survive in spirit, ready to reclaim strength and pride in the years to come. By the end of the 19th century, the Zulu Kingdom had been transformed politically but not spiritually. The legacy of Shaka's innovation, Dingaan's cunning, Mpand's patience, and Cetshwayo's bravery endured. The Zulu people had survived conquest, civil war, and colonial interference. Their identity, forged in centuries of struggle and glory, remained intact. The empire may have fallen, but the heart of Zululand, its warriors, traditions, and stories, continued to beat, reminding the world that history is not only measured in power but in the resilience of a people who refuse to be erased. After the collapse of the Zulu Kingdom's independence, life under British colonial rule reshaped the daily existence of the Zulu people. Traditional structures still existed, but they were constantly undermined by colonial policies, taxation, and the imposition of foreign legal systems. The chiefs, once sovereign rulers, were now intermediaries, tasked with enforcing British law while maintaining some semblance of traditional authority. Many Zulu felt caught between two worlds, bound by centuries of cultural norms but pressured to conform to the demands of a foreign power. The British introduced forced labor, land seizures, and taxes, which altered social dynamics dramatically. Zulu farmers who once relied on communal land ownership were required to work under the supervision of colonial authorities or provide monetary contributions that often exceeded their capacity. The traditional regiments, which had been central to Zulu society for generations, were disbanded or restricted, removing the very institution that had bound the nation together. Young men were no longer trained for warfare or ceremonial duties in the same way, which created a generational shift in values and social cohesion. Despite these hardships, cultural traditions persisted. Initiation rites, dances, and oral storytelling continued, sometimes hidden from colonial eyes. Families passed down the legends of Shaka's discipline, Cetshwayo's courage, and the heroism at Isandlwana, ensuring that even under foreign dominance, the memory of a proud Zulu identity survived. Religion, marriage customs, and communal gatherings remained key to resisting cultural erasure. British rule changed the political landscape, but the spirit of the Zulu people endured. A quiet defiance woven into daily life and remembered through stories of resilience. Although the Zulu Kingdom had fallen politically, resistance did not end. Throughout the late 19th century, uprisings and unrest occasionally erupted as chiefs and warriors pushed back against British control. Many Zulu maintained loyalty to the old royal line and regarded the colonial authorities as illegitimate. Some of these movements were direct, organized attacks on colonial outposts, while others were subtler, involving sabotage, refusal to pay taxes, or the preservation of cultural practices against orders. The influence of Cetshwayo, even in diminished capacity, remained symbolic. Loyalists organized under his name, believing that the Zulu nation could one day be reunited under traditional leadership. While Cetshwayo attempted to maintain peace and prevent widespread bloodshed, the tension simmered beneath the surface. British colonial forces, aware of these undercurrents, responded with strict surveillance, arrests, and occasional punitive expeditions. This era demonstrated a key reality. Even after military defeat, culture and identity can serve as a form of resistance. Zulu regiments may have been disbanded and the monarchy weakened, but the legacy of Shaka's military genius and the courage of warriors like those at Isandlwana inspired generations. Songs of heroism were sung at night, ceremonial dances continued, and storytelling preserved the memory of defiance. The Zulu people learned to navigate the complexities of colonial power without surrendering the essence of their identity, a lesson in resilience that would resonate into the modern era. By the turn of the 20th century, Zululand had undergone profound social and political transformations. The British colonial administration sought to control and modernize the region, introducing new systems of governance, schools, and infrastructure. Missionaries established churches and schools, which brought literacy but also sought to replace traditional Zulu customs with European norms. Some young Zulu embraced these changes, learning English, Christianity, and Western administrative skills, creating a new class of leaders who could negotiate between colonial authorities and their own people. At the same time, traditional leaders adapted. Chiefs who survived the war began to consolidate power locally, mediating disputes, maintaining law and order, and preserving cultural rights. Even with divided chiefdoms, loyalty to historical symbols like Cetshwayo, Shaka, and the regiments remained strong. These leaders ensured that knowledge of Zulu warfare, governance, and ceremonial practices was preserved, even as the British sought to modernize or suppress it. The interplay between adaptation and preservation became a hallmark of Zululand's evolution. While the Zulu had lost independence, they maintained cultural cohesion and social structure. Communities preserved language, kinship systems, and customs. Agricultural practices were adapted under colonial oversight, while oral histories kept the memory of past glories alive. By the early 20th century, the Zulu people had survived conquest, exile, civil war, and colonization, not by surrendering, but by blending resilience with pragmatism, ensuring the survival of their identity and laying the foundation for future generations to reclaim their heritage. After the Anglo-Zulu War, the British employed a system of indirect rule in Zululand. Rather than administering every detail directly, colonial officials relied on compliant Zulu chiefs to govern local communities, collect taxes, and enforce British policies. This system created both opportunity and tension. Chiefs who collaborated with the British gained authority and wealth, but were often viewed as illegitimate by the people, especially those loyal to the memory of Shaka, Dingaan, Mpand, and Cetshwayo. Zululand's social structure was transformed. While traditional leadership and customs survived in villages, British colonial laws and regulations overrode many practices. Land ownership shifted. Fertile lands were often appropriated for European settlers, while local farmers were confined to less productive areas. Labor migration became common, with young men leaving Zululand to work in mines or cities under British control. This disrupted traditional communal life and weakened the regiment system that had once been central to Zulu identity. Despite these pressures, cultural practices endured. Initiation rituals for young men and women continued in secret, traditional storytelling thrived, and dances, songs, and ceremonies reinforced a sense of national and cultural identity. Chiefs who resisted full compliance with British demands became symbols of defiance, demonstrating that the Zulu nation could survive politically fragmented but culturally united. The indirect rule period forced the Zulu people to adapt, blending survival with subtle resistance, preserving the core of their identity while navigating a rapidly changing political landscape. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the Zulu people began organizing politically to protect their heritage and rights. Educated elites, many of whom had attended missionary schools, emerged as leaders who could bridge the traditional Zulu world with European political structures. They advocated for the preservation of land, culture, and autonomy, laying the groundwork for early Zulu nationalist movements. These leaders drew inspiration from the legacy of Shaka's military genius and Cetshwayo's courage. They emphasized the importance of unity and self-determination, warning against internal division that could be exploited by colonial authorities. Public gatherings, debates, and cultural societies became vehicles for political mobilization. Rituals and oral history were repurposed to foster a sense of shared destiny, recounting battles, victories, and defeats to instill pride and resilience. Resistance took multiple forms. Some chiefs organized passive defiance by refusing to comply with taxes or colonial directives. Others coordinated local uprisings when the British overstepped boundaries, particularly regarding land and labor policies. While full independence was not yet achievable, these movements kept the idea of Zulu sovereignty alive. The Zulu nation, once fragmented by war and colonial conquest, found cohesion in culture and political aspiration, ensuring that even under British rule, the dream of self-determination endured. As the 20th century progressed, Zululand continued to evolve. Colonial infrastructure, roads, railways, and schools transformed the physical and social landscape, creating new opportunities and challenges. Zulu communities adapted, blending traditional practices with European education and technology. Young Zulu men and women began to engage in commerce, administration, and urban life, creating a new social class that could navigate both worlds. At the same time, the memory of the Zulu Kingdom's glory persisted. Historical sites such as Isandlwana, Rorke's Drift, and the royal kraals were preserved in oral history and collective memory, teaching each generation the importance of courage, strategy, and cultural pride. Festivals, ceremonies, and regimental training remained central to village life, ensuring that traditions passed seamlessly from elders to youth. The interplay between adaptation and preservation defined modern Zululand. While colonial policies restricted political independence, the Zulu people cultivated resilience and cultural pride. The legacies of Shaka, Cetshwayo, and other leaders provided a framework for identity, strategy, and leadership. By maintaining these traditions alongside selective engagement with colonial society, the Zulu positioned themselves to survive, adapt, and ultimately reclaim a sense of agency in the decades to come. The foundation laid during this period would later influence movements for political and social rights in the 20th century, proving that even in subjugation, the spirit of the Zulu Kingdom remained unbroken. By the late 19th century, Zululand had emerged from the shadows of the Anglo-Zulu War into a new era marked by regional conflicts that shaped South Africa. Although the kingdom was politically fragmented under British oversight, Zulu warriors remained respected and feared for their discipline and battlefield skills. Neighboring African polities, European settlers, and colonial authorities often sought Zulu support in conflicts, recognizing the strategic value of their military prowess. Zulu leaders negotiated carefully, balancing loyalty to tradition with pragmatic alliances. Chiefs offered warriors for local skirmishes, particularly in disputes over land, cattle, and resources, while avoiding direct confrontation with British authorities when possible. This delicate diplomacy ensured survival in a politically complex environment. The legacy of Shaka's military system persisted. Warriors trained rigorously in formations, spear handling, and tactical maneuvers, preserving the organizational discipline that had once challenged empires. During these years, the Zulu nation adapted its strategies to changing technology. Firearms became more common among regiments, but traditional weapons such as the iklwa spear and cowhide shield remained central to ceremonial and practical combat training. Oral histories emphasized the importance of discipline, coordination, and bravery, ensuring that young Zulu warriors internalized the values of courage and tactical intelligence. Even while subordinated politically, the Zulu maintained a reputation as elite warriors, capable of influencing the outcomes of regional conflicts and asserting their presence in the dynamic and contested landscape of Southern Africa. The outbreak of the First and Second Boer Wars, 1880 to 1881 and 1899 to 1902, presented both challenges and opportunities for the Zulu. While no longer a unified kingdom capable of independent warfare, Zululand's warriors were sought as mercenaries or allies by both British and Boer forces. Chiefs negotiated with colonial authorities to protect their communities, sometimes offering warriors in exchange for recognition of territorial rights or protection from encroachment. Zulu involvement was complex. Some chiefs allied with the British to ensure survival and gain strategic advantage over rivals, while others maintained a degree of neutrality, refusing to participate in conflicts that did not serve Zulu interests. Despite the fragmented political state, Zulu regiments demonstrated loyalty, discipline, and battlefield acumen. Stories of Zulu scouts, skirmishers, and bodyguards appear in accounts from both British and Boer sources, underscoring the enduring reputation of Zulu martial skill. Through participation in these conflicts, the Zulu also preserved and adapted military traditions. Regiments retained hierarchical command structures, maintained ceremonial training, and reinforced the tactical lessons inherited from Shaka and refined under Cetshwayo. Even in the context of colonial wars, the Zulu demonstrated that their cultural and martial heritage remained intact. These experiences laid the groundwork for a renewed sense of national identity, showing younger generations that the legacy of their ancestors could survive and adapt, even in the midst of external pressures and modern warfare. By the early 20th century, Zululand was politically subdued, yet culturally resilient. The regimental system, the backbone of Shaka's military genius, was preserved not for conquest but as a ritual and educational framework. Young men were still trained in the techniques of spear combat, shield handling, and formation tactics. These drills became symbolic rites of passage, reinforcing discipline, unity, and pride. Education, both traditional and missionary-led, emphasized the importance of Zulu history, heroism, and identity. Oral storytelling continued to highlight battles such as Isandlwana, Rorke's Drift, and the civil conflicts of Ndandakusuka, instilling a sense of continuity and respect for ancestral achievements. These cultural practices ensured that even under British oversight, the Zulu people retained a shared memory of military excellence and political sovereignty. At the same time, the Zulu navigated modernization. Some regiments evolved to serve ceremonial roles in colonial structures, participating in parades, festivals, and local defense initiatives. Others retained a semi-autonomous status within their communities, acting as guardians of tradition and symbols of cultural continuity. By blending traditional martial structures with the realities of colonial rule, the Zulu created a resilient framework that preserved their identity and ensured that the essence of Shaka's vision, discipline, courage, and unity would endure well into the 20th century, setting the stage for future generations to reclaim agency and leadership in a rapidly changing world. In the early decades of the 20th century, Zululand remained under strict British colonial administration. Chiefs who had once held sovereign power were now reduced to local enforcers of colonial policies, tasked with collecting taxes, organizing labor, and mediating disputes under the watchful eyes of British officers. Despite this, resistance simmered beneath the surface. The legacy of Shaka's disciplined military organization and Cetshwayo's strategic leadership inspired covert forms of defiance, both symbolic and practical. Many communities resisted through passive defiance, refusing to pay taxes, maintaining traditional land tenure systems despite colonial mandates, or continuing to train youth in regimental formations and ceremonial drills. Others engaged in active resistance, such as disrupting labor drafts or challenging the authority of British-backed chiefs. Oral histories and community records from this period reveal that the Zulu people were careful to preserve their cultural identity, ensuring that traditions of warfare, discipline, and loyalty were transmitted despite political suppression. The British, recognizing the potential for rebellion, implemented policies to fragment unity further. Chiefs were deliberately pitted against one another, and succession disputes were encouraged to prevent a unified resistance. Yet, these measures often backfired, as communities maintained clandestine communication and reinforced the shared memory of the kingdom's past glories. The enduring belief in Zulu sovereignty, cultivated through centuries of heroism, ensured that even under colonial oversight, the spirit of defiance remained alive, fostering a foundation for future political movements. During this period, social reform became both a tool of survival and a means of resistance. Missionaries and colonial administrators introduced schools, Christianity, and Western medical practices, aiming to modernize Zulu society according to European standards. While some young Zulu embraced these opportunities, they did so selectively, blending Western education with traditional cultural practices. Regimental training, once central to military campaigns, evolved into cultural education. Young men learned spear techniques and battle formations, not only as a martial skill but as a rite of passage, instilling discipline, courage, and loyalty. Women continued to participate in ceremonial roles, preserving dances, songs, and oral storytelling that chronicled the history of Shaka, Dingaan, Mpand, and Cetshwayo. These rituals became acts of resistance, reinforcing identity and community cohesion despite the imposition of colonial values. Zululand also saw the rise of cultural societies and local councils dedicated to preserving heritage. These groups documented history, taught language, and encouraged communal cohesion. By institutionalizing cultural preservation, the Zulu transformed adaptation into a form of subtle resistance. While outwardly complying with colonial demands, they safeguarded their traditions, ensuring that the knowledge of military discipline, leadership, and historical memory would survive for future generations, creating a bridge between past heroism and modern identity. By the 1920s and 1930s, the Zulu began engaging more directly with the political structures of South Africa. Educated elites, often trained in mission schools, began advocating for land rights, the preservation of cultural autonomy, and representation within colonial governance. These leaders drew inspiration from the legacy of Shaka and Cetshwayo, emphasizing unity, strategic organization, and moral authority in their campaigns. Political movements emerged both locally and nationally. Zulu intellectuals formed societies and committees to lobby for communal rights and resist exploitative labor practices. Chiefs who retained influence worked alongside these movements to protect their communities. This period saw the early foundations of Zulu nationalism, with historical memory and cultural pride serving as a unifying ideology. Songs, stories, and ceremonies commemorating historical victories reinforced the legitimacy of these movements and mobilized communities around shared values. These political efforts laid the groundwork for the Zulus' active participation in 20th century South African politics. By combining traditional social structures with modern political strategy, the Zulu nation demonstrated resilience and adaptability. The regiments of Shaka, the leadership of Cetshwayo, and the unity forged in past wars had not been forgotten. They were repurposed to navigate colonial and apartheid-era South Africa, ensuring that Zululand's people remained a powerful cultural and political force. The preservation of identity, combined with strategic engagement, became the hallmark of the Zulu nation in the modern era. The early 20th century brought global conflict to South Africa, and Zulu men were called upon to serve in both World War I and World War II. Despite historical grievances against colonial authorities, many Zulu enlisted, driven by a combination of duty, economic necessity, and loyalty to their chiefs who had negotiated service agreements with the government. Their contributions were substantial, though often overlooked in mainstream histories. During World War I, Zulu regiments fought primarily under the banner of the British Empire in campaigns across East Africa. They participated in battles against German colonial forces, navigating challenging terrain and hostile environments with the same discipline that had characterized Shaka's regiments centuries earlier. These soldiers brought traditional Zulu courage, endurance, and battlefield ingenuity to modern warfare, adapting their skills to the demands of rifles, machine guns, and artillery. The blending of traditional training with modern combat tactics highlighted the enduring flexibility and resilience of Zulu martial culture. In World War II, Zulu soldiers again played a key role in campaigns throughout North Africa and Italy. They faced new military technologies, mechanized warfare, and global-scale operations. Yet their discipline and coordination remained evident. Throughout both wars, Zulu soldiers also served as laborers, engineers, and logistical support, demonstrating versatility and commitment. These contributions, while often underappreciated by colonial authorities, reinforced the image of the Zulu as a disciplined, adaptive, and strategically capable people, maintaining the legacy of Shaka and Cetshwayo on a global stage. Following the World Wars, Zulu leaders increasingly turned to political organization to assert rights, protect culture, and navigate the oppressive structures of South African governance. Missionary-educated elites, tribal chiefs, and community organizers collaborated to create institutions that represented Zulu interests in the growing political landscape. This period marked the emergence of formal Zulu nationalism, blending traditional authority with modern political strategy. The Inkatha movement, which would later evolve into the Inkatha Freedom Party, had its roots in these early forms of Zulu political organization. Leaders emphasized unity, cultural preservation, and political advocacy, often invoking historical figures like Shaka and Cetshwayo as symbols of courage and sovereignty. Public gatherings, festivals, and ceremonies were not just cultural events, but also acts of political mobilization. Oral histories and songs from historical battles reinforced collective memory, educating new generations about past glories and inspiring confidence in future leadership. Zulu political consolidation was not without tension. Conflicts arose between traditional chiefs and emerging educated elites, as well as with neighboring ethnic groups competing for representation under the colonial and later apartheid administrations. Nevertheless, the shared memory of historical resistance, from Shaka's conquest to Cetshwayo's leadership and the heroics at Isandlwana, provided a framework for negotiating power, preserving culture, and asserting agency within a system designed to limit their influence. These efforts ensured that the Zulu nation retained cohesion and political relevance well into the mid-20th century. The institutionalization of apartheid in 1948 brought unprecedented challenges to the Zulu people. Racial segregation, land dispossession, and legal restrictions targeted African communities, including Zululand. Traditional governance structures were undermined by the state's policies, and economic opportunities were severely constrained. The homeland system, designed to contain Black South Africans in designated territories, limited mobility and further fragmented communities. Despite these hardships, Zulu culture, identity, and social cohesion persisted. Chiefs and community leaders continued to serve as intermediaries, protecting their people where possible while navigating the strictures of apartheid law. Education became a key tool for survival and resistance, with mission schools and community programs teaching literacy, history, and civic awareness. Young Zulu men and women were encouraged to remember the historical legacy of Shaka, Cetshwayo, and the regiments, fostering pride, unity, and a sense of resilience. During this era, resistance took multiple forms, from organized protests and legal challenges to cultural preservation and clandestine political organizing. The Zulu people demonstrated remarkable adaptability, blending tradition with modern strategies to survive and maintain identity. Their historical memory served as both a source of strength and a roadmap for resisting oppression. Even under apartheid, the spirit of the Zulu Kingdom endured, a testament to centuries of courage, strategic thinking, and unyielding pride. The late 20th century witnessed a profound cultural resurgence among the Zulu people. After decades of political repression and systemic marginalization under apartheid, communities sought to reclaim and celebrate their heritage. Cultural festivals, traditional dances, and ceremonies such as the Umkosi Wokalanifa Amadlozi, honoring ancestral spirits, and reed dances became central avenues for reinforcing identity and community cohesion. These events were not merely symbolic. They represented a reclaiming of historical memory, pride, and social unity that had endured since the era of Shaka and Cetshwayo. Education played a significant role in cultural revival. Schools and community programs incorporated Zulu history, oral storytelling, and the teaching of regimental formations, ensuring that the younger generation understood both the martial legacy and moral values of the kingdom. Oral histories emphasizing victories, strategic brilliance, and leadership instilled pride and continuity. Communities deliberately preserved traditional practices, even under urbanization pressures, seeing them as a bulwark against cultural erosion. This resurgence was intertwined with resistance. By embracing and celebrating their history, the Zulu people asserted that identity and autonomy could not be legislated away. The memory of Isandlwana, Rorke's drift, and the strategic genius of Shaka became educational tools, cultural symbols, and political metaphors. In doing so, Zulu culture not only survived but flourished, demonstrating resilience in the face of historical oppression and ensuring that the foundations of their warrior heritage remained intact for future generations. As the anti-apartheid movement gained momentum, the Zulu nation played a critical role in both organized and grassroots resistance. Leaders drew upon centuries of political and military tradition, blending historical lessons with modern strategies. The Inkatha Freedom Party, IFP, emerged as a central political movement, advocating for Zulu cultural rights, local governance, and political representation while navigating a complex and often violent landscape of South African politics. Zulu activists were deeply engaged in the struggle, participating in rallies, lobbying, and negotiations with other anti-apartheid entities. Their leadership emphasized the importance of unity, strategic planning, and disciplined organization, echoing the regimental systems established under Shaka. Oral histories and cultural narratives were leveraged to inspire activists and community members, emphasizing resilience, courage, and self-determination. This period was marked by both triumph and tragedy. While the Zulu people asserted their identity and political presence, tensions with other groups and violent clashes often arose, sometimes exacerbated by state manipulation under apartheid policies. Nevertheless, the Zulu commitment to cultural and political survival ensured that their voice remained influential, demonstrating that centuries of leadership, martial discipline, and unity could be adapted to modern political struggles. With the end of apartheid in 1994, the Zulu nation transitioned into a new political and social era. Leaders who had preserved cultural identity and political influence emerged as critical figures in post-apartheid governance. The legacy of Shaka and Cetshwayo informed leadership styles, emphasizing strategic decision-making, coalition building, and the maintenance of social cohesion. Post-apartheid, Zulu communities focused on cultural revitalization, economic development, and political representation. Traditional ceremonies, regimental training, and oral histories became integrated with modern civic education and political engagement. The Zulu monarchy, though largely symbolic in government, served as a unifying cultural institution, providing guidance, mediating disputes, and inspiring pride. Moreover, Zulu leaders participated in national political structures, contributing to policy, governance, and advocacy for cultural preservation. Their influence reflected a centuries-old principle: leadership and resilience are inseparable from identity and history. The survival of the Zulu Kingdom, despite colonial conquest, wars, and apartheid, enabled its people to emerge as a proud and influential nation in the democratic era. This period exemplified the enduring impact of Shaka's innovations, Cetshwayo's leadership, and centuries of disciplined martial and cultural tradition, proving that the spirit of the Zulu Kingdom could transcend centuries of adversity and adapt to a modern world while preserving its core identity. In the 21st century, Zululand has become a center of cultural tourism, drawing visitors from across the globe who are eager to witness the history and traditions of one of Africa's most legendary kingdoms. Historical sites such as Isandlwana, where Zulu warriors defeated the British in 1879, and Rorke's Drift, where Zulu bravery clashed with imperial forces, are meticulously preserved and presented as living museums of heritage. These sites are not mere monuments. They are spaces where stories, rituals, and performances bring history to life. Cultural tourism has also revitalized traditional practices. Annual events, such as the reed dance and first fruit ceremonies, attract thousands of participants and observers, blending ritual, education, and celebration. These ceremonies emphasize the values of respect, discipline, courage, and community, principles that trace back to Shaka's military innovations and Cetshwayo's leadership. Local communities benefit economically through tourism while simultaneously reinforcing a sense of pride and continuity. Educational initiatives complement tourism. Schools, workshops, and community centers teach visitors and youth about Zulu history, martial traditions, and oral storytelling. Demonstrations of historical regimental formations, spear techniques, and shield training allow for interactive experiences that convey the strategic and cultural genius of Shaka and the enduring bravery of Zulu warriors. Modern Zululand exemplifies a living history where tourism, education, and cultural pride coexist to celebrate resilience and legacy. The history of the Zulu Kingdom has achieved global recognition, not only for its military brilliance but for its cultural, political, and social influence. Scholars, filmmakers, historians, and writers have highlighted the ingenuity of Shaka's reforms, the strategic brilliance of Cetshwayo, and the courage of Zulu warriors who resisted imperial powers against overwhelming odds. Academic studies explore Shaka's military innovations, including regimental formations, short stabbing spears, and encirclement tactics, demonstrating their lasting significance in military history. International exhibitions, documentaries, and literature ensure that Zulu history is integrated into global narratives. These projects emphasize not just battles, but the social organization, leadership structures, and resilience of the Zulu nation. The story of a small kingdom rising to challenge an empire resonates universally, inspiring admiration and respect. Global audiences learn that the Zulu were more than warriors. They were state builders, strategists, and guardians of cultural identity. The preservation and dissemination of Zulu history also reinforce cultural diplomacy. Through international collaborations, exchanges, and performances, Zululand projects its heritage globally, ensuring that the legacies of Shaka and Cetshwayo continue to educate and inspire. Modern recognition validates centuries of courage, strategic thought, and cultural innovation, bridging historical legacy with contemporary global awareness. The legacies of Shaka and Cetshwayo endure in modern Zululand and beyond. Shaka's military innovations, rigorous regimental training, the iklwa spear, the bullhorn formation, continue to be studied as revolutionary in global military history. Cetshwayo's leadership during the Anglo-Zulu War serves as a case study in strategic resilience, diplomacy, and moral courage. Both figures embody principles that resonate today: discipline, unity, foresight, and leadership under extreme pressure. These legacies are not merely historical. They shape contemporary Zulu identity and governance. The Zulu monarchy, though largely symbolic in political terms, provides continuity, mediates community disputes, and represents cultural pride. Educational programs emphasize the strategic and ethical lessons of historical leadership, inspiring young Zulu leaders to engage with modern challenges while grounded in their heritage. Modern Zululand balances tradition with progress. Economic development, education, and tourism coexist with ritual, martial tradition, and cultural preservation. Across South Africa and globally, the Zulu people are recognized for their resilience, innovation, and enduring spirit. The story of Shaka and Cetshwayo proves that leadership, strategy, and courage can transcend centuries, leaving a legacy that inspires not only a nation but the world. A testament to a people whose history has withstood conquest, colonization, and modern challenges, while remaining unbroken in spirit and identity. The story of the Zulu Kingdom begins with Shaka Zulu, one of history's most visionary and innovative leaders. Born in the late 18th century, Shaka inherited not only the bloodline of the Zulu, but the ambition and intellect to transform a small clan into a dominant regional power. Through relentless innovation, he revolutionized warfare in southern Africa. The iklwa, a short stabbing spear, replaced traditional throwing spears, emphasizing close combat. Regiments, known as amabutho, were rigorously trained in discipline, coordination, and the infamous bullhorn formation, allowing Shaka to outmaneuver larger forces. Under his leadership, the Zulu Kingdom expanded rapidly, absorbing rival clans and forging a state that combined military efficiency with political organization. Shaka's reign was characterized by both brilliance and brutality. He demanded loyalty, instilled fear, and enforced strict codes of discipline. Yet his reforms were not purely about conquest. They created a society unified by shared purpose, order, and identity, capable of resisting external threats and internal dissent. This foundation set the stage for the Zulu Kingdom's resilience long after Shaka's assassination, proving that a visionary leader could forge an empire that would endure for generations. Following Shaka's death, the Zulu Kingdom faced succession challenges and internal strife. Leaders like Dingaan and Pand maintained control, but it was Cetshwayo, Shaka's great-grandson, who restored Zulu military strength and national cohesion by the mid-19th century. Cetshwayo inherited a kingdom that was politically fragmented but culturally unified, and he focused on discipline, military readiness, and diplomatic engagement. His reign culminated in the Anglo-Zulu War of 1879, a defining moment in both African and global history. Under Cetshwayo, the Zulu army achieved one of the most remarkable victories of the era at Isandlwana, shocking the British Empire. Yet, despite bravery, tactical ingenuity, and unity, the Zulu faced overwhelming colonial power. After defeats at Kambula and Ulundi, Cetshwayo was captured and exiled, signaling the collapse of Zulu political sovereignty. However, Cetshwayo's leadership left an indelible mark. His strategic acumen, insistence on unity, and moral courage under duress became symbols of resilience. Even in exile, he maintained dignity and continued to inspire loyalty among his people. Cetshwayo's story demonstrates that leadership is measured not only in victory, but in endurance, adaptability, and the ability to preserve culture and identity in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. Though the Zulu Kingdom lost independence, its cultural, martial, and political legacies endured. The people preserved regimental traditions, oral histories, and ceremonies, ensuring the stories of Shaka, Cetshwayo, and legendary battles were passed down through generations. These legacies shaped Zulu society under colonialism, apartheid, and into modern South Africa, blending adaptation with preservation. Today, Zululand thrives as a region where history is celebrated and taught. Tourism, education, festivals, and cultural events honor centuries of resilience and achievement. Global recognition of the Zulu Kingdom underscores its influence, from Shaka's military genius, Cetshwayo's leadership, to the courage of warriors at Isandlwana and Rorke's Drift. The monarchy, while largely symbolic, continues to unify and inspire, reminding all that identity, culture, and strategic vision can survive conquest, oppression, and time itself. The Zulu story is one of enduring courage, strategic brilliance, and cultural pride. From Shaka's transformation of a small clan into an empire, through Cetshwayo's trials against imperial forces, to modern efforts at cultural preservation and political engagement, the kingdom's legacy remains vibrant. The Zulu nation exemplifies the power of vision, discipline, and resilience. A story that inspires not only South Africa but the world, proving that history is not just about battles or empires, but the unbreakable spirit of a people. And that concludes our journey through the incredible history of the Zulu Kingdom. Today, we've seen how Shaka's innovation, discipline, and ambition created a warrior nation, how Cetshwayo's leadership and courage inspired generations, and how the Zulu people preserved their culture, identity, and resilience even under conquest, colonial rule, and apartheid. The moral of this story is clear. True strength lies not just in armies or kings, but in unity, courage, and the will to survive against all odds. The Zulu Kingdom reminds us that culture, identity, and leadership endure when passed down through generations, a legacy far greater than any battlefield victory. If you enjoyed this epic journey through history, don't forget to subscribe to History Teller YT for more fascinating stories from the past. Hit the bell icon so you never miss a tale that will transport you through time. And remember, history is not just in the books. It's in the stories, the lessons, and the spirit that shapes our world today. We'll see you next time for another incredible adventure into the past.